Hey everyone. So last Sunday, that was the 22nd of March, we had a sort of a different setup for our message. We had an interview with Marcell Steuernagel, and we were talking about God's presence and worship, as in using music and worship in a community. And that was a great talk, and we actually didn't get to get through all of it in the time we had for Sunday. So we have a little follow-up now with a question about how we can talk about this theology of worship in a time when we can't gather for worship with each other. So yeah, here up on the rest of our talk now. And by the way, just subscribe on YouTube or follow us on Instagram, and you can get all the updates on what we've been up to. Yeah, Marcel, for that follow-up question, for those of us who are tuning now in the middle of the week, it's in this time in which we can't gather for worship, right? We can't meet for community worship, which is sort of the anchor for a lot of us. We're not, I think for a lot of Christians are not used to sort of having sessions of worship music or anything like that on their own, maybe listening, but not like in the same way. How do we deal with our theology of worship in these trying times in which we find ourselves confined to our homes, and maybe some of us don't have a family or a housemate with whom we can at least gather? How do we deal with this loneliness and worship and community issue of on these times with the virus around and us having to do our part in protecting each other?
I think I want to answer this question based on the same premise, the flourishing premise that I was talking about for our Sunday cast. Limitations and opportunities, they hold hands, right? So this idea, the narrative of the kind of psychotic narrative, and I live in the U.S. I mean, talk about a country that overreacts, right? Has a tradition, has a cultural tradition. Psychosis can be very limiting, right? Because you get tunnel vision, and it's like, okay, this is bad. And we have to acknowledge that this is bad. Hundreds of thousands of people infected, people dying. This is not a good situation. But if you remove hope from that equation, then you're in trouble. You're in more trouble than you already were. From the perspective of flourishing, there's a recognition that crisis and opportunity are two sides of the same coin. So, what we're doing together this week is a great opportunity. We wouldn't regularly do it, but the situation kind of forces us to create an opportunity where we can have this conversation across the Atlantic, and it's hopefully helpful, right? So that's an opportunity that's created. Other opportunities are also created. When you talk about the spiritual disciplines, you have that kind of classical setup of a discipline as a recurring practice that opens a window into a spiritual reality. Maybe we're being forced into a discipline, of contemplation that we might not otherwise practice in the same way, because you're restricted by the social interactions. You're also distracted. You're also not distracted by the same logistical considerations. You don't have to commute. You don't have to spend, I don't know how long people spend in traffic or going from one place to another or doing all these things because you can't do them. So what can you do? What are the advantages of being silent and looking out or going for a walk in nature by yourself? Things that we normally can't do the same way because we're busy. So I think that's one thing. Embracing the limitations can help us leverage this forced discipline as a window into spiritual reality, and to be frank, as a window into how we're doing on the inside. Sitting still might not be easy for all of us, but if we're forced to do that, then dealing with ourselves in the presence of God. The second point, I think, has to do with what interactions look like, right? So we're all being forced to interact online, virtually, digitally. It makes you pay attention. It makes you listen in a different way, because you don't have the same kind of rich interface that a face-to-face interaction gives you. So I can't pay attention to all the little cues that come from body language, from microfacial expressions, from smells, from the way people dress. These things are not available to us, but you can really, really listen. and learning to listen to each other in this time, I think, is really important, right? So a couple of things that I've been doing is trying to call people instead of just saying, well, I'm going to give up there. I can't talk to people, can't hang out. Well, who are the people on my contact list? And then making it a discipline of calling them on a regular basis and saying, how are you doing? Chat for a couple minutes, and then move throughout your day. So it creates a different kind of community, and hopefully some of that will transfer back into our daily lives whenever this whole situation is past us. So I think that's the second point. And then the third and final point is what community means. So there's been, in theology, there's been this recognition that, I used to think about church as you have to go there and you have to go and be part of what's happening live, right? Yeah. But there's this increasing recognition that, in fact, church has become broader. And what does it mean when someone's in a hotel room participating in the service at OIC and saying, I went to church? They're in on the conversation. So that changes the way we think about community. And we have to learn to cultivate that in ways that go beyond being there once a week. The pastor organizes and the worship team rehearses, and then they do the thing and we kind of show up. This crowdsourcing model that is being forced upon us means that we all have a responsibility to be community, get together in a different way. The pastor can call everyone in the church over the week, but what I'm saying is that you have to do that. You have to chat it up. You have to engage. Otherwise, it's impossible to do.
Yeah. And I think, for us in OIC, in a way, this makes some sense. We're spread all over. Like, there's so many people that have been a part of OIC and now are across the world, and we get in touch with some of them, but it's hard to but then to sort of have this, we've always dealt with the sense of community that goes beyond where our bodies can meet, right? Mm-hmm. And this sort of brings it up, and have some of these people tuning in even to these videos or just asking how our stuff over there, and it just reminds us that community is bigger, and that we get different kinds of opportunities, but also bring different people to our hearts. And I think about our other brother who lives somewhere else. We're a lot of brothers living all over the world. Lives in Austria. Last Sunday, he just sent me a picture of himself having his moment and hearing my preaching. And I'm like, I would love him to be there when I'm speaking on a regular basis. He can't, he lives in a different country, but suddenly we have a opportunity for community that we wouldn't usually have. So I think about everybody out there, and I think, maybe there's some blessing to this. And for me, who see people come and go in OIC all the time, it makes me remember with thankfulness to people who are all over the world and are still my brothers and sisters, and we're still part of the same fellowship, even if we don't get to meet in the same way. So I'm grateful for that. Yeah, thanks, Marcell. Thanks for this time together, and we'll keep in touch.
Thanks for inviting me. God bless you all.
Have a great week, everybody.